The rain pattered against the window of the sleek black SUV as it glided through the busy streets of New York City. In the back seat, Ethan Blackwell, the CEO of Blackwell Enterprises, stared out at the glass towers that surrounded him, his mind lost in the swirl of thoughts and decisions that defined his life. The city buzzed with activity outside, but inside, his world was still, cold, and distant. He was a man of power, wealth, and influence. But behind the facade of success was a man who had been scarred by the betrayal of those closest to him. At 32, Ethan had everything a person could ask for: money, status, and a reputation that stretched across the business world. But the one thing he lacked was trust. A past filled with lies and deceit had taught him to never let anyone in, especially not a woman. The betrayal had left deep scars, and he had learned the hard way that trust was something that could shatter in an instant. Today was another important day, a high-stakes business meeting that could make or break one of his biggest projects yet. But what he didn't anticipate was Isabella "Izzy" Grant, the young and ambitious daughter of one of the most influential families in the country, becoming a part of the equation. Izzy Grant, at 28, was a striking woman with a sharp mind and an unyielding spirit. Born into wealth and power, she had lived a life of privilege, always surrounded by luxury and admiration. However, beneath her glamorous lifestyle, Izzy harbored her own ambitions. She was tired of being seen only as the daughter of a rich family. She had big dreams that went beyond the shadow of her family's name. And to make those dreams come true, she knew she had to break away from the comfort of her father's empire and build something of her own. Her opportunity came when Blackwell Enterprises announced a massive new project that would change the tech landscape. Izzy saw it as a chance to prove herself, to show that she wasn't just the product of a wealthy upbringing, but a businesswoman in her own right. The only problem? She had to work with Ethan Blackwell at the meeting. The conference room was sleek and modern, the walls adorned with abstract art and glass panels offering a view of the city skyline. Ethan sat at the head of the table, exuding power and control, his sharp suit and chiseled features adding to his commanding presence. His eyes were cold, calculating every move, every decision, always made with precision. And today, as always, he had no time for distractions. Izzy entered the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She wore a tailored black blazer and a crisp white blouse, her hair pulled back in a neat bun that framed her face perfectly. She exuded confidence and grace, but Ethan didn't even spare her a glance as she walked in. She was here to do a job, and he had no interest in anything beyond the business at hand. When she took her seat across from him, Ethan finally looked up. For a brief moment, their eyes locked, and for a fleeting second, Izzy felt a shift in the air. There was a chill in his gaze, but also something else, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She quickly shook off the feeling and focused on the task at hand. Ethan nodding toward the presentation screen. "Let's get started. I don't have all day. We're here to discuss the future of this project. Let's keep it professional." Izzy kept her posture straight, her face betraying none of the nervousness she felt inside. She was used to boardrooms, used to high-stakes meetings, but there was something about Ethan's presence that unnerved her. Perhaps it was his cold indifference or his sharp, calculating mind. Whatever it was, she had a job to do and she wasn't about to let him intimidate her. "Izzy, I agree. Let's talk numbers first. The projections for the AI and cybersecurity integration are looking solid, but we need to increase the scalability." If we don't address that now, we risk losing momentum in the market. Ethan raised an eyebrow, his eyes never leaving her face as she spoke. She was sharp, confident, and precise, qualities he respected. But he wasn't convinced. He had heard plenty of smart people talk big ideas, only for those ideas to fall apart when it came to execution. Ethan, and why should I trust your projections, Ms. Grant? You're still learning how to navigate the business world. This isn't some college project. Izzy's eyes flickered briefly with a mix of surprise and frustration, but she quickly masked it with a cool smile. She had heard the condescension in his voice, but it only made her more determined. Izzy, because I've spent my life learning how to turn opportunities into something real. I'm not just here because of my family's name. I'm here because I can do this. And I'm ready to prove it. Ethan's gaze softened for a split second, but it was almost imperceptible. He wasn't used to women talking to him like that, confident, unafraid, and willing to challenge him. It intrigued him. Later, that day the meeting concluded with some tentative agreement on the next steps. But even as the room emptied, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Izzy Grant was more than just another privileged daughter of a wealthy family. She had something else, something that made her stand out. And for reasons he couldn't explain, that bothered him. As he watched her leave the room, his mind wandered. He had to admit she was good for someone so young. But that was also the reason he had to be careful. Trust didn't come easy for him, and he wasn't about to make the same mistake twice. But Izzy, she had other plans. The following week, Ethan Blackwell couldn't shake the memory of his first meeting with Izzy Grant. He had worked with a countless number of people, but something about her confidence, her sharpness, the way she seemed unafraid of him had lingered in his mind. In all his years of dominating the business world, few had ever dared to challenge him in the way she had. For some reason, that challenge felt different from the others. It was ... personal morning. At Blackwell Enterprise, Ethan walked into his office with purpose, the tall glass windows offering a view of the bustling city below. His assistant, Sophie, had already prepared the agenda for the demo meetings. More deals to be made, but nothing new. Yet his mind kept drifting back to Izzy and the project they were working on. The proposal she had laid out during their meeting had been impressive. But the more he thought about it, the more he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that there was something more at play. This wasn't just about business, at least not for her. As the morning passed, Ethan's thoughts were constantly interrupted by the steady stream of phone calls and emails. But when a certain email from Izzy Grant popped up on his screen, his attention snapped back. The subject line read, "Project Update, Proposal Adjustments, and Next Steps." He clicked it, and a new draft proposal filled his screen. Izzy had made some adjustments to the scalability aspect they had discussed during their last meeting, along with a few new ideas that could help them secure a larger portion of the market. Izzy's note, "Ethan, I've revised the proposal based on our last discussion. I've also included a few additional strategies that could expand our reach within the next 6 months. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts." Ethan sat back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the document. The ideas were solid, more than just viable, they were innovative, and they had the potential to disrupt the market. But there was still something about Izzy that made him wary. Maybe it was the fact that she was constantly challenging him, or maybe it was because he didn't trust anyone that easily, especially someone like her. Afternoon at Grant Industries. Meanwhile, Izzy sat in her office, reviewing the latest feedback from Ethan. She had spent hours perfecting the revisions to the proposal. And now, as she read his response, she felt a strange mixture of frustration and curiosity. Ethan had praised her adjustments, but there was still that familiar coldness in his tone. It was as if he acknowledged her skills, but refused to fully respect her as she sat back in her chair, staring at the screen. Her phone buzzed. Sophie, Ethan's assistant. Ethan would like to meet with you again at 4 p.m. today to finalize the details. Izzy's heart skipped a beat. This meeting was crucial. The project was moving fast, and she knew that securing Ethan's approval would be the key to gaining real independence and respect in the industry. This wasn't just about proving herself to him. It was about making a mark in a world where she had always been in the shadows of her family's legacy. But as she prepared for the meeting, she couldn't help but wonder why Ethan had become so cold towards her. Was it because of her family's background? Was she too young in his eyes to be taken seriously? Or was there something deeper, something personal, that made him wary of her? The meeting at Blackwell Enterprises, exactly 4 p.m. Izzy arrived at Blackwell Enterprises, her heels clicking across the polished marble floors as she made her way to Ethan's office. She had dressed professionally, yet still managed to exude an aura of confidence that matched her ambition. Ethan was already sitting at his desk when she entered, his back to her as he stared at the screen in front of him. He didn't acknowledge her presence at first, which, for some reason, irked her. Izzy calmly. You wanted to discuss the proposal, Ethan. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Ethan, yes, take a seat. We need to talk about where this project is headed. Izzy sat across from him, her posture straight, her eyes never leaving his. She could feel the tension in the room, the silent barrier that he had built around himself. It was clear to her now, this wasn't just about business for Ethan. There was something personal at play, something he wasn't ready to let go of. Izzy, I've made some adjustments, as you can see. We're looking at a unique opportunity to leverage both the technology and the market demand. But if you have any concerns, I'm happy to address them now. Ethan leaned forward, his fingers drumming lightly on the desk, the silence stretching between them. He wasn't angry, but his tone was deliberate. He had questions, and he wasn't going to let them slide. Ethan, your adjustments are solid. Izzy, but I can't help but feel that you're still hiding something. You've been pushing hard on this project, but I don't know if I fully trust your motives. Izzy's eyes narrowed slightly. She had expected some form of resistance, but not this direct an accusation. Still, she kept her composure. Izzy, if you're talking about my motives, Ethan, you're mistaken. This isn't about family legacy or anything else. It's about proving that I can succeed on my own terms. There it was, again the challenge. Ethan's eyes softened for just a moment, but his skepticism remained. Ethan, that's what I'm worried about. Izzy, you say it's about your own terms, but there's always a part of me that wonders how much of this project is really about you, and how much is about proving something to your family. Izzy felt a flicker of annoyance. She hadn't come here to be interrogated. She had come here to prove herself. Izzy, this isn't about them. It never was. If I wanted to live off my family's name, I could have done that, but I want more than that. I want to build something meaningful, with or without them. Ethan studied her carefully, his expression unreadable. There was something raw in her words, something real. For the first time, he saw past the confident exterior and caught a glimpse of her vulnerability. Ethan, and if I don't give you this opportunity, what then? Izzy, without hesitation, then I'll find another way. But I believe in this project, Ethan, and I believe you're the right partner to make it happen. The room fell silent for a few moments. Ethan's gaze softened just a fraction. He had been prepared to shut this down. He had expected her to stumble, to let her ambition cloud her judgment. But Izzy's confidence was unwavering, and for some reason that made him reconsider. Ethan, all right. We'll move forward. But remember, Izzy, this isn't just about business. If we do this, we do it together, and we do it my way. Izzy smiled, a glimmer of victory flashing in her eyes. This wasn't just a business deal anymore. It was a turning point in her career and, possibly, in her life. After their tense meeting, Izzy Grant left Blackwell Enterprises with a mix of triumph and unease. She had managed to push Ethan toward agreement, but she could still feel the undercurrent of distrust between them. Ethan Blackwell wasn't a man who let his guard down easily, and the fact that he still seemed unsure of her made her wonder if their partnership would ever be truly equal. As she walked out of the imposing glass doors of the building, the weight of the city pressed down on her. The tall skyscrapers, the endless flow of people, all of it seemed so far removed from the small corner of the world where she had grown up. Izzy had always been the golden child of the Grant family, but now she was on her own path, carving out her place in a world where the only thing that mattered was success. She climbed into her waiting car, her mind still swirling with thoughts of Ethan. The next day, Blackwell Enterprises Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the pile of paperwork in front of him. Despite the pressing tasks of the day, his mind kept returning to Izzy Grant and the previous day's meeting. He had been dismissive of her at first, expecting her to crumble under his scrutiny, but instead she had done the opposite. She had stood her ground, had matched his intelligence and ambition, in a way that bothered him more than he was willing to admit. His office door opened without a knock, and Sophie, his assistant, stepped in, her presence cutting through the silence of the room. "Sophie, there's a call from Izzy Grant. She says it's urgent." Ethan sighed, his fingers drumming absently on the desk. He hadn't expected her to call so soon, but maybe he was wrong about her. Maybe she wasn't just playing the role of a wealthy heiress trying to make a name for herself. Maybe there was more to her than that. Ethan reluctantly put her through. The phone rang once, then twice. Ethan picked up, his voice steady. "Ethan, this is Ethan." Izzy on the other end, her tone serious. "Ethan, we need to talk about the next steps in the project. There's something I think you should know." Ethan's mind raced. Her words were businesslike, but there was an urgency in her voice that caught him off guard. "Ethan, what's going on?" "Izzy, I've been looking into a few things, and I think there's an issue with one of the key players in the project. We need to address it before it becomes a problem. I suggest we meet later today, face to face." Ethan hesitated, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Ethan, you know the drill. Izzy, if there's an issue, we handle it through the right channels. I don't have time for any personal games." There was a brief silence on the other end. Izzy's tone shifted, now more measured. "Izzy, I understand. But this isn't a game, Ethan. This is about the future of the project, and I think you'll want to know what I've found. Can I count on you to meet me at 4 p.m. today?" Ethan knew better than to dismiss her call so easily. There was something in her voice that suggested she wasn't bluffing. He didn't like feeling out of control, but he couldn't ignore the fact that Izzy had been more insightful than most of the people he had worked with. "Ethan, fine. I'll meet you in the conference room." 4 p.m. sharp. The line went dead. and Ethan placed the receiver down with a soft thud. He wasn't sure why he felt an unsettling mix of anticipation and frustration, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting would change things, whether for better or worse. He didn't know. 4 p.m. Conference room entered the conference room promptly at 4 p.m. And as expected, Izzy was already there, waiting. She had a calm, determined look on her face, and her posture reflected confidence that Ethan had come to expect from her. But today, there was something different in her eyes. She wasn't just here for business, there was a sharpness, an intensity that told him this wasn't going to be a typical meeting. Ethan coldly, "All right. Izzy, you said you had something to discuss. Let's get to it." Izzy didn't waste any time. She slid a manila folder across the table, and Ethan opened it. Inside were copies of emails and memos detailing discrepancies in the project timeline, with names of individuals involved, people from his own team. "Izzy, I've been doing some research, and I've found that some of the suppliers we're working with have been cutting corners. This could put the entire project at risk. If we don't take action now, it could cost us millions." Ethan studied the documents, his brow furrowing as he flipped through the pages. He wasn't surprised that there were issues. Projects of this scale always had bumps along the way, but what bothered him was that Izzy had been the one to uncover them. She wasn't just an ambitious businesswoman. She was sharp, and that was starting to become a problem for him. "Ethan, this isn't your responsibility. Izzy, you're here to help with the tech side, not to micromanage the supply chain." "I'll handle this." Izzy leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "Izzy, I understand that, Ethan, but you and I both know this project won't succeed if we ignore these issues. I'm not trying to step on your toes. I'm trying to help you. We're in this together, whether you like it or not." The tension in the room grew. Ethan's patience was wearing thin, but he couldn't deny the truth in her words. She had been right all along, her instincts were sharp, and she had earned his respect, even if he didn't want to admit it. Ethan finally, "All right. I'll look into it. But I don't want you stepping outside your lane. Izzy, if you're going to continue pushing, then we do this on my terms." Izzy gave a small, satisfied smile, the kind that told him she wasn't intimidated by him. "Izzy, of course. Ethan, I'm here to help, not to undermine you." Later that evening, Izzy's offices. Izzy left the meeting, her heart raced. Ethan had agreed to look into the issue, but she knew it wasn't enough. She wasn't just trying to prove her value to him. She was trying to prove to herself that she could succeed on her own terms. She couldn't let him or anyone else control her fate. This project was her chance to break free from her family's shadow, and nothing would stop her from succeeding, no matter how much Ethan Blackwell tried to hold her back. But even as she walked down the hallway, she couldn't ignore the feeling that the battle wasn't just about business. It was about power, control, and something more, a personal connection that was growing between them, even though neither of them wanted to admit it. It had been a week since their meeting, and the tension between Ethan and Izzy was palpable. The project they were working on together was progressing, but the cracks in their relationship were becoming more apparent. Ethan had agreed to investigate the supply chain issues Izzy had raised, but he hadn't fully committed to her suggestions. He was still wary of her, still unsure if she was genuinely trying to help or simply playing a game. Morning at Blackwell Enterprises. Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the financial reports and project timelines in front of him. His mind was elsewhere, however. He couldn't focus on the numbers, couldn't push the thoughts of Izzy out of his head. Since their meeting, He had tried to maintain his professional distance, but it was becoming harder to do so. Her intelligence, her boldness, it all made her stand out in a way he wasn't prepared for. And the way she handled herself in the last meeting, so calm, so assured, had left a mark on him. But it wasn't just her professional demeanor that had affected him. It was the way she pushed him to confront his own insecurities. His fear of trusting others. Ethan's phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. He glanced at the screen. It was a message from Sophie, his assistant. "Sophie, Izzy Grant is here to meet with you. She says it's urgent." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. He had been expecting this. Izzy had been persistent, and he knew it was only a matter of time before she came knocking again. But this time, he didn't want to let her walk all over him. She had her way of getting under his skin, of challenging him in ways no one else had. Ethan to Sophie, "Send her in." In the conference room, Izzy walked into the conference room with a sense of urgency in her step. She had been working late into the night, trying to make sense of the issues in the project. But something had come up that couldn't wait. She had to meet with Ethan now. When she entered the room, Ethan was standing by the window, his back to her. He didn't turn around immediately, which only added to the tension in the air. Izzy could feel the weight of his silence. There was still an unspoken distance between them, one that she had hoped would dissipate. But at Izzy, "Ethan, we need to talk." Ethan turned, slowly, his gaze sharp as he met her eyes. There was a flicker of something in his expressions, something that made Izzy wonder if he was finally going to open up to her, or if he was going to continue keeping her at arm's length. "Ethan, about what?" Izzy didn't waste any time. She walked up to the table, laying out a set of reports in front of him. She had spent hours the night before, going through every detail, trying to pinpoint the root of the problem. "Izzy, I've found something else. The delays we've been facing are being caused by internal mismanagement. Someone's been cutting corners in our engineering department. If we don't deal with this now, it'll jeopardize the entire project." Ethan's expression hardened as he flipped through the documents. His mind raced. If this was true, it could cost him millions. He had to act fast, but part of him still hesitated. He had trusted people before, only to have them betray him. "Ethan, how do you know this? Have you confirmed these allegations?" Izzy could see the skepticism in his eyes. She wasn't surprised by it, but she knew she couldn't back down now. This was too important. "Izzy, I've verified the information through multiple sources. I wouldn't have come to you with this if I wasn't sure. But we need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the worse it'll get." There was a long pause as Ethan processed the information. He could feel the weight of the decision hanging over him. On the one hand, he hated having to rely on anyone else, especially someone like Izzy. But on the other hand, he knew that if what she was saying was true, they couldn't afford to ignore it. "Ethan, all right. I'll have the team look into it. But if this is some kind of game, Izzy, I'll make sure it's the last one you ever play." Izzy's eyes narrowed slightly, but she held her ground. "Izzy, it's not a game. Ethan, if you think I'm doing this for personal gain, you're wrong. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do for the project. For both of us." Ethan studied her for a moment, searching her face for any sign of dishonesty. He didn't trust Izzy especially, not someone like Izzy, who had a reputation for being as ambitious as she was beautiful. But there was something about her conviction, something about the way she stood in front of him, that made him think she was telling the truth. "Ethan, fine, I'll have it investigated. But don't make me regret this. Izzy gave him a small nod, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, a glimmer of victory. She wasn't just getting the job done. She was proving herself to him, and she wasn't going to stop until he saw her for who she really was. Someone capable of far more than just being the daughter of a wealthy family. Later that day, as Izzy left the office, she felt a rush of adrenaline. Ethan had agreed to investigate the issue, but that was only the beginning. She knew that trust was a fragile thing with him, and she had to earn it, piece by piece. But this was her chance to prove herself not just to him, but to herself as well. The elevator doors closed behind her as she stepped into the lobby. Her phone buzzed with a new message from Sophie. Sophie, Ethan wants to meet again at 7 p.m. tonight. He wants a full report on the engineering department. Izzy didn't hesitate. She had already begun working on the next steps, and she wouldn't rest until everything was in place. This was her moment to shine, and she wasn't going to let anything stand in her way. The evening sky was beginning to darken, casting long shadows across the streets of New York. The city seemed to come alive as the lights flickered on. But inside the sleek, modern boardroom of Blackwell Enterprises, the atmosphere was heavy with anticipation. Izzy Grant had spent the entire afternoon preparing for her meeting with Ethan Blackwell. The stakes were higher than ever. If she couldn't convince him to trust her and take action on the issues in the project, everything she had worked for could unravel. She walked into the building with purpose, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she made her way to the elevator. Despite the nerves bubbling in her chest, Izzy kept her expression composed. She was used to high-pressure situations, but tonight felt different. She could feel the tension in the air between her and Ethan. There was something personal, now as subtle. Unspoken pull that neither of them had acknowledged yet, but both of them knew was there. 7 p.m., the boardroom. Izzy arrived promptly, and as she entered the boardroom, Ethan was already there, standing by the window, looking out at the sprawling city below. His posture was tense, his hands folded behind his back as he gazed out into the distance. Izzy took a moment to gather herself before speaking. Izzy calmly, "You wanted a report on the engineering department. I have it here." Ethan didn't turn around immediately, but his voice was sharp when he spoke. "Ethan, I've read your preliminary findings, but I need more than just facts, Izzy. I need to know how deep this goes. If we're dealing with sabotage, we need to take immediate action." Izzy felt a shiver run down her spine. There it was, again, the control, the precision in his voice. Ethan wasn't a man who dealt with problems lightly, and his expectations were always high. But this time, something in his tone made it clear that he wasn't just talking about business. There was something personal at play, a deeper level of involvement that neither of them had addressed yet. Izzy walked over to the conference table and placed the folder in front of him, the documents neatly arranged. She knew she had to make him see the seriousness of the situation without overplaying her hand. This wasn't just about getting the project back on track. It was about proving herself, proving she wasn't just a woman from a wealthy family, but a force to be reckoned with in the business world. Izzy firmly. The discrepancies in the supply chain aren't just a minor issue. They're widespread. If we don't address them immediately, we could be looking at significant delays and financial losses. Ethan finally turned to face her, his eyes locking with hers. There was an intensity there that made her heartbeat quicken, but she refused to show any sign of weakness. "Ethan, I'm aware of the gravity of the situation, but I don't take action based on assumptions. I need proof. Real proof." Izzy took a deep breath and walked closer to him, her voice steady but carrying an edge of determination. Izzy, I've already provided the proof. Ethan, I've done the legwork. I've spoken to the right people, and I've uncovered the truth. This isn't a matter of speculation. The integrity of this project is at risk, and I'm not going to let that happen. There was a long pause, as if Ethan was weighing her words carefully. His gaze was unreadable, but she could see the flicker of something in his eyes, a mixture of frustration and something else. Ethan, you've got guts. Izzy, I'll give you that. His voice was quieter now, the harshness replaced with something more contemplative. He took a few steps toward her, his tall frame looming slightly, but his presence felt different, more imposing, more personal. Ethan, but that doesn't change the fact that you've made a lot of assumptions about me. You think I'm just going to trust you because you've been right about a few things. Izzy stood her ground, meeting his gaze without hesitation. Izzy, I don't need you to trust me. Ethan, I need you to trust the project. This is about the future of both of our careers. If we don't fix this now, we risk everything. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he seemed to consider her words carefully, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he was searching for any signs of dishonesty. But there was none. Izzy was as serious as she had ever been. After a moment, he spoke again, his tone softer, but still carrying that authoritative edge. Ethan, fine. I'll give you what you want. We'll investigate further. But this isn't just about business anymore, Izzy. Her heart skipped a beat. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. She didn't know if he was referring to the project or something more. Something personal. Izzy quietly. What do you mean? Ethan looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he spoke. Ethan, you've been pushing me, testing my patience. And I've been testing yours. But there's more at play here, isn't there? Izzy's breath caught in her throat. She knew exactly what he was implying. The tension that had been building between them, those moments of silent connection, the way they seemed to challenge each other, it had crossed a line. The professional facade was starting to slip, revealing something more raw, more dangerous. Izzy softly. This isn't about us. Ethan, it's about the project. But even as she said the words, she knew it wasn't entirely true. There was something personal about this connection, whether either of them wanted to admit it or not. The lines between business and personal were blurring, and Izzy didn't know if that was a good thing or a dangerous one. Ethan's expression softened just slightly, and for the first time, Izzy saw a flicker of vulnerability behind his steely exterior. Ethan, I'm not so sure about that. Izzy, he stepped back, his posture relaxing slightly. It was clear to Izzy that whatever had been happening between them wasn't just a business transaction. There was something more complex at play, something neither of them had fully acknowledged. Izzy more firmly, then let's keep it about business. We need to act now. The longer we wait, the more this project will slip out of our control. Ethan stared at her for another long moment before finally nodding. Ethan, all right. We'll take care of it. But remember, Izzy, if you push me too far, I won't hesitate to make changes. I play to win. Izzy met his gaze, a challenge flickering in her eyes. Izzy, I'm here to win too. Ethan, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this work. Later that night, Izzy's apartment. Izzy returned home that evening. Her thoughts were still racing. She had played her cards carefully with Ethan, but she couldn't shake the feeling that things were changing. The professional tension between them, had started to evolve into something more a mix of mutual respect and undeniable attraction. Something neither of them had been prepared for. She wasn't sure where this would lead. But one thing was certain. This partnership was becoming much more than just business. And she wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a dangerous one. The days following their meeting had passed in a blur of tense emails, late-night discussions, and strategic decisions. Despite the progress on the project, the relationship between Ethan and Izzy had only grown more complex. Each time they crossed paths, there was a palpable tension in the air, an unspoken understanding that they were walking a fine line between professional ambition and something more personal. Izzy was determined to make the project succeed, but she couldn't deny the undercurrent of feelings that were starting to bubble up between them. And Ethan, he was a man who always kept his emotions in check, but lately, his eyes would linger on her just a little too long, and his words, though usually sharp, seemed to soften when directed at her. The morning at Blackwell Enterprises, Ethan sat in his office, his mind lost in the details of the project. But it wasn't just the project he was thinking about. He couldn't stop thinking about the way Izzy had challenged him, the way her presence seemed to make everything feel ... different. The walls he had so carefully built around himself were beginning to crack, and for the first time in a long while, he felt vulnerable. His assistant, Sophie, knocked and entered without waiting for a response. Sophie, Izzy, Grant is here for her 10 a.m. meeting. Mr. Blackwell, Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't prepared for this meeting. Despite the professional demeanor he tried to maintain, the mere thought of seeing Izzy made him uneasy. Ethan sent her in. Izzy walked into the room a few moments later, her presence undeniable. She wore a sharp suit, her confidence matched by her carefully composed appearance. As she entered, Ethan rose from his chair, but this time, there was no cold, businesslike demeanor between them. Something had changed. He could feel it in the way she carried herself, the way she looked at him. Izzy smiling slightly. "Good morning, Ethan. I hope I'm not interrupting anything too important." Ethan coolly, "You're not. Let's get to it." Izzy glanced at him, her eyes sharp. She could tell there was something different in his demeanor. Ethan's usual controlled self was slipping just a little. The walls he had built were showing signs of weakness, and she was starting to see it. She sat across from him, her gaze steady. The tension between them was undeniable, but she didn't back down. "Izzy, I've been reviewing the last phase of the project. We're moving forward, but we need to make some adjustments if we want to avoid the pitfalls we discussed last time." Ethan nodding, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. "I've been looking into it. I'll make the adjustments, but we're behind schedule, and if we keep delaying, it'll be harder to recover." Izzy leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. She had expected this response. Ethan was always about results, always about efficiency, but there was a part of her that knew they had to address something beyond the project. "Izzy, we can push through the delays." "Ethan, but we need to be transparent about what's happening here. We can't afford to pretend everything is fine when it's not. People are starting to notice." There was a pause, a tension building between them. Ethan's eyes softened for a fraction of a second. "Ethan, you're right. I'll deal with it." Izzy's breath caught for a moment. She could see it now, the way Ethan's eyes seemed to search hers, the way his words weren't just business anymore. There was something else there, a flicker of something deeper. And she wasn't sure if she was ready to face it before either of them could speak again. Sophie knocked and entered the room. "Sophie, Mr. Blackwell. There's an urgent call for you from the investor team. They need your approval on the financial report." Ethan standing up. "Tell them I'll call back in 5 minutes. We're almost done here." Izzy watched him rise, the subtle shift in his posture as he closed the distance between them. She felt a strange tension in the air. It wasn't just about business anymore. It hadn't been for a while. Izzy standing up. "We'll get through this. Together, we just need to trust each other." Ethan stopped for a moment, his back to her. The words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. "Ethan, trust is something I don't give easily, Izzy." There was a hesitation, just a brief one, before he turned to face her again. His expression was hard, but his eyes held something more, something that almost felt like regret. "Ethan, but I'm starting to believe you might be right. We do need to trust each other. If we're going to make this work." Izzy's breath hitched, but she masked it quickly. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Ethan was finally letting his guard down, and it was more than just business, it was personal. "See softly. We'll make it work. We always do." Ethan nodded, though the weight of his words felt heavier than either of them wanted to admit. There was an unspoken understanding between them now. Their professional relationship was no longer just about the project. It was about trust, something neither of them had been willing to give fully, but now they were both teetering on the edge. Later that evening, Izzy's apartment, Tizzy walked through the door of her apartment, her mind racing. The meeting with Ethan had left her with more questions than answers. Yes, they were moving forward with the project, but there was something more at play. Something between them that neither of them had fully addressed. She stood in front of her window, looking out at the city lights below, her reflection staring back at her. The line between business and personal had been blurred, and she knew that once they crossed that line, there would be no turning back. The question now was whether they could navigate it without losing themselves or each other.